afresh. Okay. Thank you for reminding. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Grathitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamrita Varshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashaadhyayanim Amba Tvamanusandathami Bhagavad Gite Bhavadveshinim. We may safely say that we are now in the Arjun Club. What is that Arjun Club, which I call the Arjun Club? It is sitting through all 18 chapters, no matter how long it takes, and making sure that the knowledge sinks in and not giving up halfway, no matter how difficult. So in the 7th chapter, Bhagwan himself has said, Manushyanam sahastreshu kaschidattati siddhaye yatatamapi siddhanam kaschinmam veti tattvataha. It simply means that hardly one among thousands of men, says Krishna, hardly one among thousands of men strive to realize me as in Krishna or the Param Tattva, the highest truth. Hardly one among thousands strive, and of those who are striving, again some very rare one, devoting himself exclusively to me, knows me in reality. So finally, it happens in every camp which is conducted by the Swamis and the Rishis, that there are always a handful who will join, and then there will be just a few left at the end when the chapters are closing and Krishna is giving his closing message. This is, even in Krishna's time it was true, and it's true even in our times, and therefore I congratulate all of you for being in that exclusive Arjun Club. It's really an exclusive club. So sitting through 18 chapters, not a mean task at all. Having said that, we come to chapter 18, and as we are closing, we know that so far Bhagwan has already given Arjun sufficient grounding in the disciplining of the intellect. To discipline the intellect means to be able to use the intellect for its true purpose. That is Jnana Yoga. What is the true purpose? The true purpose of intellect is only and only doing Vivek. Vivek means distinction or discrimination between truth and untruth, permanent and impermanent, Sat and Asat. And to be able to distinguish and to keep that uppermost in the mind is Jnana Yoga. Bhagwan has also given Arjun and us sufficient grounding in Karma Yoga, which means it is the disciplining of the body, where when we are involved in the task that has been given to us, and not owning the task, not owning the results either, but giving it our 100% is a disciplining of the body and of the senses, because the senses and the mind run away into desires. So Karma Yoga has also been a kind of grounding for Arjun and for us. Now in the last chapter, Bhagwan chooses to end with Bhakti Yoga. Of course, in the 6th chapter, we saw a great detailing of Dhyan Yoga, which is meditation, which is one way of transcending not only the fires of the body and the cravings of the mind or the confusions of the intellect, because all that is transcended in meditation, but it is also a way of transcending the ego and the gunas, because in that state none of these are present, let's say. And because the gunas and the mind and the body and the cravings and the confusions are not present, there is no sorrow. So the whole purpose of humankind, the whole endeavor of humankind everywhere seems to be the seeking of happiness. Where there is no sorrow, there is an automatic happiness. Happiness is not something that comes from another source. Okay, now I don't have sorrow and now I need happiness to come in and fill that. It's not another thing or object coming from the outside source. So Chinmayaji was very fond of saying that joy is an inside job. He used to use these strange phrases. Joy is an inside job. It is already there, and therefore when we are not troubled by the body, mind, intellect confusions and cravings, then that sorrow is not felt, and joy automatically is our true nature. Satchit Anand. Remember, the third component of our true Swarup is Anand, joy. Joy is an inside job. Now, having said it so far that Arjun and we have been grounded in Jnana Yoga, the disciplining of the intellect, Karma Yoga, disciplining of the body. Now Bhakti Yoga is the disciplining of the mind and emotions, because our emotions are tempted to get attached to this and that, Raga and Dvesha, attachment and Mamatva. So how do you do that? So Krishna says in the 66th verse, Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. So look, Arjun, forget about attaching yourself to anything. Just attach yourself to me, as in take refuge in me. Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. Sorry. So Bhakti Yoga seems to be the final message of Krishna, as in something that is a route open to everyone, irrespective of their caste, creed, color, their learning, their status in society, and their fine intellect or riches, or looks or appearance. Irrespective of all that, bhakti is something which is open to everyone. And it is bhakti that can lead us to become nirbhaya, nishok, nischint and nishank, that is without doubt. We saw also in Bhakti Yoga that हम अपनी मर्जी भगवान की मर्जी पर न डालें, because it is one way of saying भगवान, thy will be done. आपकी will should be done the way it is, because we don't know how circumstances come about, why they come about, what is the lesson in it for me. It is for my good, I know it. It is for my good somewhere that Bhagwan has given me the certain situations and circumstances. Maybe through these ordeals and highs and lows, maybe I need to learn some lesson about sabra, titiksha, forbearance. Maybe I need to learn some lesson about humility. Maybe I was getting too arrogant about my status or achievements or talent or success, whatever. So, when something, what we think is going wrong, is actually Bhagwan's way of teaching us something, and it's a lesson, and it's a spiritual lesson. So we have to accept it with open arms, and that comes only when we have surrendered and come to His Sharan and come to His feet and say, thy will be done, aapki will should be done, and I surrender to Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. That was in the 66th verse. 67th verse said, Idam tena tapaskaya na bhaktaya kadachana. But this knowledge, Arjun, may not be spoken. Do not share it with those who are devoid of tap and austerities. Nacha shushrushave vachyam. Unko bhi mat sunana, that is, those who have no desire to listen. If they are not seeking, do not squander the knowledge on those who are really not seeking. And therefore you find that Sanatan Dharma has never proselytized, has never taken to the ships and said that, okay, now we are going to transform civilizations through this great knowledge. Okay, we know it's great knowledge because it tells you the true nature of Paramatma, of ourself and of Sansar, and it gives us a clear distinction between matter and spirit, and it gives us a strong grounding in the fact that we are not just matter, but we are something grander beyond that. Now, when it gives us such a strong grounding in spiritual life, there is no need felt to spread it across the seas or to bring in larger and larger numbers into the fold, because this is not a fold. This is not an indoctrination. In fact, it's not a church at all. Because very often people say, oh, you know, Jesus Christ and Muhammad, and we know who the leaders of the various religions are, and who is the originator of Sanatan Dharma. So Chinmayaji used to say, this is a body of knowledge. Welcome to my library. Library meaning it's the rishis who have come across this knowledge through their meditation. And in this library, you will find the highest knowledge. So why are you looking for one Son of God, Jesus the Son of God? There is no such entity in Sanatan Dharma. Okay. So Krishna said in the 67th verse, do not speak this in a light vein or squander it among those who have no tapas, atapaskaya. Now tap here needs a little bit of an explanation, because tap means austerity. It means the ability to bear, the ability to withstand the onslaught of something which is unconducive with forbearance and not giving way to vikar. Vikar is kam, krodh, mad, lobh, moh, envy, jealousy, anger, resentment, and all that, not giving way to it. When do we give way to this vikar? When we are asahishnu, that is when we are non-tolerant of what? Dvandva sahishnu. When we are intolerant of harsha shok. Dvandva means duality. Harsha shok, sukha dukha, मान अपमान. तो इसमें जब अपमान हुआ या दुख हुआ या शोक हुआ, I am intolerant. That means I don't have enough tap in me to not allow shok. Shok is one of the vikars. Yes, one of the modifications. Now, vega sahishnu. So when there is anger rising in me, when there is envy rising in me, when there is resentment, that force of that anger and envy, am I able to withstand that force? So in Sanskrit, the word force is veg. Vega sahishnuta also means that yes, you have enough tap in you, enough forbearance in you to be able to bear the force of your own anger rising within you. And therefore, there are so many kinds of tap here, and the one we were talking about is paratap sahishnuta, paramat, par others, mat opinions, sahishnuta. That when there are other opinions or other schools of thought and other philosophies and other belief systems with which we are faced, then in that case, don't lose our ground and start doubting our own knowledge, and neither give way to dislike or resentment. So that is a kind of tap. And parotkarsha sahishnuta means parotkarsh, दूसरों का success and योग्यता या talent या ability देखकर, when we are able to keep ourselves from expressing any vikar. Vikar again is kama, krodh, mad, lobh. You see, when we are able to bear the force, the weight of these vikar in any situation, be it when we are faced with the belief systems of others, or with the success of others, or with dukha or apman, which is an onslaught on our mind and ego, all this is a sense of tolerance. So here tolerance has been equated with tap. Tap meaning that shakti of being able to bear. Now, having said that, Krishna goes on with his final message in verse number 68. Ya imam paramam guhyam madbhakteshva medhasyati bhaktim mai param kritva mame vaishyasya samshayah. Bhagavan says, he, with supreme devotion, the one who listens to me with supreme devotion, not listens, will teach this supreme secret, not even listen. The one who teaches this with supreme devotion, my knowledge, is doubtless going to come to me. Come to me here means what? Realize the highest truth. Simple. So sharing the knowledge of the Gita with others in any form. So it's not as if we do it in the form, in the state of a status of a guru. It's not as if we are gurus, as if we are repositories of knowledge, but as if this is a form of worship to God, to Krishna himself. Teaching the Gita is a form of worship. That's what Bhagavan is saying. And if we are inspired by it, anytime, any one of you, all of us who are studying or continue to study, if we are inspired by any knowledge, we want to share it. Don't we do that? When we see something that's of great value out there, so there's a big sale and Apple Store has announced a 50% discount and all. At once we want to share it with our friends. We want to share so many material things with our friends. So why not the higher spiritual knowledge, to say to them, look, this is the source, this is where we can come, our inspiration is here. So Bhagavan says, don't keep it to yourself. When you teach it or share it in any form, it is your form of worship to me, to Krishna. And Taittiriya Upanishad itself has said, Swadhyaya pravachanabhyam na pramaditavyam, means carry the torch forward. Don't just sit on it. Carry the torch forward. It has been said in the Upanishads also. Mam eva eshyati. Bhagavan says in this verse, Mam eva eshyati means he will come to me. How? Because every time we explain or we talk about it or we listen or we discuss or we question or when we try and figure out something, in that process itself our mind is dwelling on the highest knowledge. And so when the mind dwells on it, there is reflection and contemplation on the highest knowledge. To that extent, the mind is not involved in sansar. It is already pointed towards Krishna, towards Bhagavan or the ultimate absolute truth, whatever you call it. And therefore, Bhagavan says, in doing that, in teaching or listening, you are actually reaching me through that contemplation. And if once we do it sincerely. But of course, Bhagavan hasn't warned Arjun, but we may like to warn ourselves that the moment we start talking about the highest knowledge, there is this ego that kicks in. And that is a false ego, and we know it is a false part of our facade. It's a false identity that we carry with us. But that ego likes to kick in and say, look, I know about the scriptures and I can talk about it and I can explain it to others. So our note of warning to all of us who actually have this ego kicking in about carrying God's message. And therefore, at the end of any task that we do as worship, there has to be Krishna Arpanam Mastu. Back, I offer it back to Krishna. The knowledge was His. We spoke about it. We are inspired by it. And back it goes to His feet. And then what is the prasad? Whenever we offer anything to Krishna, to God or at a temple, there is always a prasadam that comes. And what is that? Number 69. 69 onwards actually. Nacha tasman manusyeshu kaschinme priyakritamaha bhavita nacha me tasmad anyah priyataro bhuvihi. Bhagavan says, no one is dearer to me than the one who is carrying my message, priyakritamaha, one who is doing this service to the highest knowledge. And doing service to the knowledge is like doing service to Krishna. How do we do it? It has to be through listening, shravanam, mananam, nitidhyasanam, listening, contemplating and holding that knowledge in the mind, or sharing it, or keeping the mind on it through swadhyaya sadhana and seva and satsang, that is self-study. All these methods are not discounted, and at the same time bhakti is keeping our mind on it. All these methods are one way of worshipping Krishna. But many of us now have, for thousands of years, we have been reading the scriptures and the Gita. And many of us now feel it's enough for me to have a nice, brand new, very expensive Gita copy, nicely folded in a sacred red cloth and put at my altar. And every day I get up and I pay my respects to that book. And I hold it very dear to me. I revere it. I respect it. But am I going to get the knowledge with that kind of worship? No, Bhagavan is very clear that it has to be shared knowledge. It has to be knowledge that is held in the mind and heart. So for that we have to listen, we have to understand, use our buddhi. Bhagwan had used the word buddhi yogaha. Use our buddhi yogaha to reach him. Otherwise it can't be done. Beyond that, of course, there has to be surrender. To say, okay, I have understood, but that vastness is beyond me. So I surrender to that vastness. That is bhakti. So it's like saying that I have placed a huge book of physics on my altar, and I get up every morning and I pray to the book and I offer prasad and I revere that book a lot. It's a big book of physics, right? Now I may do it for years together, but am I going to understand a single principle of physics by doing that? So in the same way, there are certain laws, or the cosmic laws, which are enjoined in our scriptures, which have to be studied. This doesn't have to be overemphasized in a group like ours, which is already used to rationalizing and to intellectualizing. But yes, it has to be a word of caution to those who are doing mere lip service to the Bhagavad Gita and not studying it. So Bhagwan says, Priyakrit Tamaha, the one who carries this knowledge is the dearest to me. And Tasmat Anya Prihatara Bhuvi, on this earth there is no other dearer to me than the one who tries to master this rare knowledge, who tries to master it, and who tries to live the principles and share it and hear it. That brings such people closer to me, says Krishna. Krishna is always waiting with open arms. It's our senses which are always running away into the sansar, even after we study, even after years of study, remember. Now, verse number 70, Bhagwan says, not only the preacher, not only the one who is speaking it, but what about the listener? The one who doesn't talk about it, what about him? So Krishna covers that point and says, number 70, Adhyeshyate chaya imam dharmyam samvadamavayoho jnana yagyena tenaham ishtasyamiti me matihi. The one who will study this sacred dialogue of ours by listening, by him also I will be worshipped. So the speaker as well as the listener has been lauded by Krishna himself, and he has compared actually this Gita Yagya, we call it. Remember the word we use, Gita Yagya. That word has come from Bhagavad Gita, of course. Here it means that this dialogue that we are holding and the speaking and listening that we are doing, so it is akin to a Yagya. Yagya is a fire, remember, a holy sacrificial fire. We know about it. But when we study how come it is a holy sacrificial fire, then it simply means that we are keeping the fire of knowledge kindled. The fire of knowledge remains kindled, and what do we offer as oblations into the fire? We offer our intellect. Syamiti me matihi. That is the sacrifice of wisdom. That's what Bhagwan believes. We offer our intellect, our thought, our concentration, and our buddhi of discernment. Vivek. Vivek is the function of buddhi, to see what is right, what is satya, what is asatya, why am I falling into asatya, why am I letting sorrow overtake me if I believe only that there is one satya. This buddhi is the oblation into the sacrificial fire of studies. Let's call it that way. It's a nice analogy, keeping the fire of knowledge kindled. So it's a bit like a yagya. That's why the word Gita Yagya. We could have called this class Gita Gyan. So now the sacred text is so universal, this sacred text, that every reading that is done, it sort of brings us closer and closer to that highest truth. So it becomes like a worship. Every reading becomes like a worship. So when we worship, what do? It's almost as if we are following a kind of dharma, and that is the thirst to know increases, and the thirst to apply it in our actual life increases. That's what Bhagwan calls a yagya. But Bhagwan doesn't stop here. He says, look, I have told you that the qualifications are there even for a listener when we speak, do not speak these words to the frivolous, those who treat this knowledge as frivolous or criticize Krishna or are disbelieving, and those who don't have the capacity to have tap, and those who are not seeking. Then in the verse number 71, Bhagavan says, I need some qualities of a listener. What kind of qualities do I need? Shraddhavan anasuyascha shrunuyadapi yo naraha sopi mukta shubhan lokan prapnuyat punya karmanam. Shraddhavan, I need listeners, he says, of a certain kind, who bear no malice. Who bear no malice against anyone, and especially not against Sanatana Dharma, and those who are full of faith. Shraddhavan anasuyascha. In that case, does he say that it should go only to the Brahmins or Kshatriyas or Shudras or Vaishyas or even believers in Sanatana Dharma? That word Hinduism was not there at that time. So of course but in our current terminology, if we say that he said the word should be spoken, the highest knowledge, only to the Hindus or those of Sanatana Dharma? No, not at all. In fact, that categorization doesn't exist. In fact, it is to be spoken to one who wants to know the highest truth. So if I want admission in the physics department of Harvard University, all that I have to do is to have sufficient grounding in physics, sufficient thirst to know physics, and sufficient capacity to seek deeper and deeper knowledge in physics. Otherwise, they cannot tell me, oh, you're Chinese or Indian or Malaysian or a Shudra or a Vaishya or a Muslim or a Buddhist. No. How can there be any such distinction for the one who is seeking pure knowledge? In the same way, Gita is actually a secular text. It is not a religious text in that sense. It's a secular text. Seeker of knowledge, you're here. You saw in the first year of our classes when we started, there was one Mr. Latif who used to be on our group. Now he's busy probably. That Mr. Latif was, I think, a follower of Islam. But he stuck through almost 1 year, several months of these classes, because he was just seeking knowledge, pure knowledge. And anasuyaha, Bhagavan says, I want people free of malice. That, oh, this one or that one is of a different system or religion or country or caste. No, free of malice, open-minded, unprejudiced, come to me, says Krishna. I will give you that knowledge. So a prejudiced mind in fact cannot listen openly. It becomes a very blocked and a kind of dull, unresponsive listening. So Shubhan Lokan Prapnuyat. But if I listen with an open, unprejudiced mind, then Bhagavan says, Shubhan Lokan Prapnuyat, happy worlds are yours. Happy worlds. Oh, so happiness is something, as I said, quoting Chinmayaji, is an inside job. The moment we have shed all our burdens of intolerance and prejudice, there is only happiness and joy that we can experience, because we are liberated from the burden of carrying all those conditionings and prejudices. Now, Bhagavan has spoken the highest truth and the highest knowledge and Arjun now has to live it, which means we also have to adopt some principles, if not all, some principles. Do we ever remember those principles? No. So that's why Bhagavan has said, when you speak about it to others, it becomes like a revision to you, and for you it's the duty of the teacher to say that there are greater goals in life. This is the greatest goal, to know oneself and to know the nature of Atma, Paramatma, and to know our place in this sansar, this Mayavi sansar. So there are greater goals, and we are not born just to be consumers. If you see our life today, we are just moving from consuming this or that. By consuming, I don't mean food only, I mean buying this or that, or seeking to buy this or that. So we become consumers. And consumerism is an offshoot of the capitalist, materialist lifestyle that we have adopted from another civilization. It was never part, capitalism, materialism was never part of our culture. But we also saw yesterday that along with Sanatana Dharma, which is the Purva Mimamsa theory, that the philosophy that we are studying, Vedanta, let's call it in short. At the same time, there were other systems of thought that did exist, like Charavak. It's totally, if you have gone into the details, you will notice Charavak was one of the philosophies which believed in hedonism. We are here for attaining pleasure, and pleasures are what are our birthright, and we will attain it. It was an actual stream of thought, school of thought, Charavak. We can go into the details of all the 6 philosophies that existed concurrent to Vedanta. That means at the same time. And yet, so this hedonism and pleasure seeking is not something that our civilization has given itself to. Because Vedanta has held sway as one of the most powerful schools of thought and philosophy in our civilization. There was also a school of thought which said, oh, there's no God. And the Buddhists also follow that stream of thought. That yes, there is a desire for us to gain happiness, to escape sorrow, and there is a way to do it. There has to be self-control. All this is okay, but at the end, where is God? There is no God. So the Buddhist philosophy also believes this. With all these thoughts, one has to keep a strong grounding in Vedanta, the principles that have been taught in our scriptures of Vedanta. And Gita is, of course, a condensed form of the Upanishads of the Vedantic philosophy. It's just a condensed form. But it is open to everyone, even to all normal people, to ordinary people, to the most ordinary people. They don't have to be a very high intellect or caliber at all. It's open. If I can't understand this philosophy, it's too dense and too abstruse or abstract, I may just take to bhakti in the beginning. But bhakti is also a way offered by Bhagwan. That means it is open to everyone. And yes, Krishna says, I prefer those who come to me with reverence, who come to me with respect. That condition, yes. Small condition, even Bhagwan had to lay a small condition to the listening of the highest knowledge. And going on, he says, last and final parting word of Krishna to Arjun after 18th chapters. 72nd verse, 72 is the last word of Krishna to Arjun, which says, Kachidetat shrutam partha tvayaicagrena cetasa kachidadhyana sammohaha pranashaste dhananjaya. It's just like a teacher at the end of the class saying, have you understood? Many teachers are fond of saying that. Have you understood? That's all Krishna is asking. He's saying, after having heard this knowledge Partha, with a single-pointed mind, have you heard it with single-pointed mind, or with a scattered mind, with a distracted mind? And with that distraction, has it come from your ignorance? And now has your ignorance been dispelled? If you have been listening without distraction, has all your ignorance been dispelled? Which means, अज्ञान सम्मोहः, उसका जो सम्मोह है अज्ञान का, वो नष्ट हुआ कि नहीं हुआ? ओ धनंजय, what is the ignorance that we carry? Or Arjun, let's say Arjun carried, in the beginning Arjun carried the ignorance that I am the karta, I am in this battle and I have to decide. And Bhagwan told him very squarely in I think 11th chapter, you are just nimitta matra. Nimitta matra, you are just an instrument and you are having to do the action because you are meant to do the actions. You are not the karta. Your ignorance is dispelled over there about being the karta. I am the ego. Ego is dispelled. So in that sense, that much of ajnana is dispelled. Now he had another sorrow. He was steeped in sorrow about the kith and kin being killed or being destroyed. And we have the same fear of any harm coming to our kith and kin. And Bhagwan has already destroyed that ajnana also by saying that you are just Atma. Yes? And it's like this body shedding the clothes and moving on to another body. So are you grieving for the clothes? Are you grieving for the body? So that ajnana is also hopefully dispelled. That you are Atma and so are the others. So why Why dwell in sorrow? And why dwell in ego? I am the karta. So some of these ajnana delusions have been dispelled. And another thing that he was deluded about was, I am not going to fight this battle because I think it is wrong. And Bhagavan had to say, please recognize your duty and just do your duty. So that's another big lesson for us. Do we even recognize our duty? We say very glibly, yes, I'm doing my duty. But there's many a time when we shirk our duty, when it is inconvenient or when it is uncomfortable, unconducive to our circumstances, and we find a number of excuses and justifications to take a stand. Like Arjun took a stand saying, no, I think it's wrong and I think it's going to cause sorrow. All that justification is hiding behind excuses. Bhagavan said, in your real life also, like Arjun, do not hide behind justifications. Recognize your duty and jolly well do it. And in the completion of your duty or reaching the highest, and one of our highest duties actually is to learn the highest truth. It is our duty as a human being. It may not have been written down anywhere, but that's our duty. And in the course of completing our duties, there may be hardships. But being able to bear those hardships is called tap. Real tap is that when we are reaching for the highest and there are hardships that we can surmount with joy and with forbearance, that is called tap. Tap is not saying that, oh, I have been through such hardships to pay my EMI loans, or to get my son married off, and there was great difficulty and I had financial trouble. You will have all the worldly trouble, but that doesn't come under the category of tap. Tap is a word we struggle again in English language to describe its very, very subtle essence. It is only difficulty which we encounter in reaching for the highest. That difficulty is called tap. Now, Bhagavan says, Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. If you have understood and your Agyan Sammoha is gone, then all that you have to do is come back into Sansar, having understood the nature of Satya. Come back into Sansar, nothing will have changed. The house, the bad boss and the bad neighbors, or which we called bad, of course. Now they are all there in the same position, the same thing. Everything is my bad finances. Everything is the same. But what has changed? We come back into the world having heard the greatest knowledge and do not see the ugliness, do not see the difficulties, and all that we see is the divine scheme, and we say with forbearance, thy will be done. That is the only difference. So final word from Krishna is, your Gyan Sammoha is gone if you have been listening without distraction. That means Tvayai Kagrena Chetasa. With the one pointed mind, have you heard me out? So that's the final word from Krishna, and we go on with Arjun. Arjun has something to say. Naturally, the student has to have a word at the end. Arjuna Uvacha, verse number 73. Nashto moha smritir labdhva tvat prasadan mayachyuta sthitosmi gata sandehaha karishye vachanam tava. Arjun says, destroyed is my delusion. Rest assured, dear teacher, my delusion is destroyed. And now I have gained my memory, means my knowledge. Now I have gained knowledge through your grace. I am firm, my doubts are gone, and now what he says is something very beautiful. Karishye vachanam tava. I will do as you directed me. I will do your word. I will do according to your bidding. Karishye vachanam tava. But what had Krishna said earlier? He said, Yathechasi tatha kuru. So it's the teacher's duty to say, Yathechasi tatha kuru. You do as you please, my dear. I have given you the highest knowledge. But it is the student's duty to say, Karishye vachanam tava. I will do as you bid me. See the beauty and the endearing quality of this beautiful piece of poem, which is the song of Gita. Nashto mohaha. It's like saying, Arjuna is saying, yes, it's as if I have awoken from a dream. Once I am woken up from a dream, do I still suffer the pangs and sorrows and hurts and difficulties of the dream situation? No, not at all. I don't carry it. I don't carry it with me. So, when the dream ends, my confusion ends. When the dream ends, my sorrow ends. So Arjuna is saying, Nashto mohaha, my maya, my delusion has ended. It's as if I have woken up. So now I will not fall prey to sorrow and delusion. And in the same way, all the listeners as well as Arjun, when they awake to this knowledge, then all the slings and arrows and pains and passions of the sansar are just but pinpricks. They don't really have the capacity to shake them. And then they become samadukha. Samadukha means they become samatvam. That's what one of the messages of Krishna was. Samadukha bhava. Okay. Smritir labdhva. Smritir labdhva, I have gained my knowledge. Here smriti means memory, but it stands for knowledge. My knowledge of what? Of my true nature. I have now gained knowledge of my true nature, and therefore, karishye vachanam tama. I will do tava. I will do as you bid me. Arjun is now cured. Arjun is cured of what? Of the Arjun disease. Are we cured of the Arjun disease? But we are definitely in the exclusive Arjun club, having heard Krishna out right through the teachings, right through to the end. But now, having heard Krishna right through, Arjun has regained his spiritual balance. His spiritual balance can now, I'm sure, not be shaken so easily in the face of difficulties. He will not give way to vikar. Vikar is that anger, the desire, the vague, the force, the momentum of envy, jealousy and greed, which seems to capture us, seems to ensnare us from time to time. That is something now Arjun is free of, having known the knowledge. And I hope we are too. So it's a bit like Jesus Christ, as he was climbing up the mountain, carrying his cross with him, and he was moving through a crowd of people who were jeering him, and not cheering, jeering him, taunting him. And at that time, I'm sure there was not much that he said, because that was the time he must have been shaken. But when he reached the top of the mountain and he knew that the cross that he was carrying was his own cross on which he had to be crucified, all that he said was, "Thy will be done." Thy will be done means let the God's will be done, whatever it is. Whether I have to suffer, whether I have to be crucified, whether I have to go through pain, it is for humankind. It is for my own spiritual upliftment. Whatever I am going through is for me to gain spiritually, and therefore thy will be done, said Christ. Now, Arjun has completed what he had to say. There's not much. I'm sure he's a bit teary about having to part. Of course, he's not parting with Krishna, but the lesson is over. And that compassionate way in which, Krishna had taken him under his wing, and so emotionally, psychologically healed him right through the 18 chapters and spiritually uplifted him. Now that's over. So now it is, if you remember, there's a third listener who is eavesdropping into this samvad, dialogue, the conversation. Who is that eavesdropper? Let's remind ourselves. It is Sanjaya. Sanjaya had been given the clairvoyance, the special vision by Vedvyasi, who is also his spiritual guru, to be able to see the battle and to relate the events of the battle to Dhritarashtra, who is blind. But they are both sitting in Hastinapur. So therefore Sanjay needed a special vision of clairvoyance to be able to narrate what's happening in the battle. Dhritarashtra had been given the same choice, that look, we will give you clairvoyance, we'll give you that special vision by which you can see the battle yourself. But you know how weak he was? He said, I will not be able to bear to see my sons in battle, and therefore let me be blind. but I still want to know what's happening in the battlefield. And therefore, he had started the very first verse in Bhagavad Gita is Dhritarashtra, who is saying, Dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yuyutkava. He's saying, tell me what's happening on the battlefield. Those Dronacharya, Duryodhan, and in the holy battlefield of Kurukshetra, my sons and the sons of Pandu, what are they doing? That means Kauravas and my sons, what are they up to? Tell me. The very first line of Bhagavad Gita is by Dhritarashtra, Dharma kshetre Kurukshetra, tell me what's happening there. He was given the vision but did not have the courage to say that I will be able to see my sons in battle. And therefore Sanjay was given that vision, and now Sanjay, who is now privy to this grand conversation, like we have also been eavesdropping into the conversation between Krishna and Arjun, and we have been very lucky to do that. Like Sanjay, we have eavesdropped every word and dwelt upon every word that Krishna said. So we are a bit in a place like Sanjay, who now says in verse number 74, Sanjaya uvacha ityaham vasudevasya parthasya cha mahatmanah samvadamimam ashrosham adbhutam roma harshanam. Adbhutam. I've heard this knowledge which is amazing, miraculous knowledge, and Roma Harshanam, it makes my hair stand on end, because now even the casual listener like Sanjay, in the beginning he was a casual listener. Why do I say casual? Because he was not the seeker of knowledge. He is not the one who said, tell me about the highest truth, Krishna, like Arjun said. He was just happened to be there, and he happened to be the wartime reporter, correspondent. But even a casual listener cannot resist this, the endearing quality of the Gita, and he is deeply moved. Even Sanjay is deeply moved. He is impacted by the knowledge that he has heard Krishna give, and he says, it makes my hair stand on end. Adbhutam Roma Harshanam. Because there is this great devotional fervor which is rising in him, and he is also diving into bhakti most probably. Samvadam imam ashrausham. Ashrausham, this dialogue I have heard, which is miraculous. Now this dialogue is what? It is just a mystic conversation. Arjun had many questions about sannyasa, about karma yoga, about what is a sthita pragya, who is the kind of person, what are the qualities of one who remains steady in himself, sthita pragya, who remains steady in this knowledge. So many questions he asked. And should I worship you in roop and nama roop form, that is with an idol or without an idol, in roop form or without? So many questions. This whole dialogue is a mystic conversation. Now this conversation has been likened to a conversation between the higher and the lower, that's all. You may say, oh, I don't believe historically whether such a thing happened. Okay, don't believe. That doesn't negate the knowledge. So it could be the conversation between higher and the lower. It's a symbolism. So Vasudeva is the symbolism of what? Vasudeva is the symbol of that which is indestructible, Atma, consciousness, and Partha, that is Arjun, is the symbol of matter, which is finite, limited. And therefore, what we see now is a kind of dialogue between man's highest spiritual yearning and his attractions in the material world, his sort of engagements in the material world. And we find ourselves very much in that position when we are also engaged and entangled and entrapped in the material world because of so many years and lifetimes of practice of being attached. And at the same time, this spiritual knowledge seems to beckon to us to have some kind of a tug in our heart to say, that's where I should be. So between the spiritual and the material, there is this tug. We can liken this conversation to that conversation between the spiritual and the material qualities within ourselves. So Bhagavan has already said that everyone has a potential, And Sanjay knows that Sanjay was not supposed to be privy to this highest knowledge, but even he got the highest knowledge, even a casual listener. So there is a potential in everyone, and Sanjay himself is so deeply moved and enchanted by this knowledge, Roma Harshanam. That means that everyone has the capacity to go beyond the petty whims of their senses. You know, our senses are just whimsical. They drag us here and there. And even a casual listener has the potential to have the highest knowledge. That's what we learn from Sanjay's words, who is so deeply moved at this moment. But Sanjay is also trying to, when he says, Adbhutam, it is such magical knowledge. In one sense, I think Sanjay is also trying to influence Dhritarashtra. Remember, the battle has not yet begun, and Dhritarashtra can still call off the battle. He has the power. He alone has the power to call off the battle. So Sanjay is in some way trying to influence him, perhaps, by saying that, look, this is the highest knowledge, and maybe you should not fall into this rag and moha of your sons. But you know what happened. The rest is history. Dhritarashtra still led the Pandavas and Kauravas go into battle, because Dhritarashtra's blindness went deep. Even when the highest knowledge was narrated to him, Sanjay stands moved, but Dhritarashtra does not. That means sometimes when our agyan and our ignorance and our attachments and our delusion about what is सत्य and असत, ये संसार सत्य है, इसमें से जो खुशियाँ मुझे मिलती हैं वो सत्य है. If we hang on to it so tightly, that is our blindness, and we cannot give it up easily, like Dhritarashtra. So Dhritarashtra had another issue, a problem. So many of us even do not want to hear the Gita. We say, okay. And some start listening to the Gita, and then their interest just falls after some time, and then they go their own different ways. So it happens many a time. And in this Mahabharata, there are many such characters. Because each time we say, why tell me the Gita, sit on a hot afternoon and listen to the Gita? Why can't I do something more entertaining, something more pleasurable? So we may fall into that category if we are not as enchanted, if we are not so deeply moved the way Sanjay and Arjun are. So in verse number 75, Sanjay again continues saying something about Vedvyas. The Vedvyas was his spiritual guru, Sanjay's guru also, Sanjay's spiritual guru, and now he is the one who has scripted this poem, right? So he says, Vyasa prasada chrutvan etad guhyamaham param yogam yogeshwarat krishnat sakshat kathayata swayam. Through the grace of Vyasa, now he is expressing his gratitude to Vyasa, to Vedvyas, the one who is the author of this great piece of literature. He says, Vyasa prasad, it is the prasad or the grace of Vedvyasji, that we could hear the words of Krishna directly. It's almost like that. And he stands completely grateful. And Dhritarashtra was also approached, you know that, with a special vision to hear Krishna himself, but to hear the knowledge directly, but he had refused. So, now we know very well that the moment a person says, thy will be done, Krishna, I surrender to you, let thy will be done, whatever is your will or your wish, let that be done, and I stand grateful for whatever comes my way. Even if there are scraps of knowledge, even if it's indirect knowledge, even if I've heard it partially, I stand, like Sanjay, stand grateful for it. So I was, someone shared a video the other day of two magical Japanese words. You may have seen this video. There are two magical Japanese words, and one of them is arigato. Arigato, of course, means simply thank you in Japanese. But it is said that no matter what you receive, the smallest amount on your in your wallet, or the smallest gesture, or the smallest compassion, or the smallest scrap of knowledge, or anything, learn to say arigato. Just learn to say arigato. Just like Sanjay is saying, Vyasa Prasadat, I stand grateful to Vyasa for this knowledge, whether it's come directly or indirectly to me. That attitude of gratitude is what will stand us in good stead in keeping our mind steady and keeping our arrogance and our ego and our sense gratification and joy hunting, which are our blocks to the highest knowledge. Keeping these blocks away, arigato, whatever that comes is grace, it's prasad. So can we learn to do that? And when we say, thy will be done, let God's wish be done, there's another Japanese word for it. It's a very nice video. I thought I'll take the word from there. It says ukitamo. Ukitamo is a word we should be able to say every time, which means I accept. I accept. I accept. Which means the same thing as I am in your sharan. You know, and which is what Bhagwan has expected from us, to be in his sharan. Mamekam sharanam vraja. The moment we say that everything that comes in our way, it could be ordeals or travails or accomplishments or successes or whatever, all that we have to say is uketamo. Japanese word. Uketamo. Okay, I accept. All this knowledge which has been imparted to us verbally through the words of Krishna, who says, just come and take refuge in me, Mamekam Sharanam Vraja, means exactly the same thing as the Japanese uketamo. But the difference is that in the Japanese way of life, they translate everything into a training, into a physical training. So the words that we have been listening rather intellectually are supposed to transform us, and sometimes they don't. So the Japanese are very good at creating exercises and trainings which are physical for the same spiritual knowledge. For example, uketamo. So there is this sacred mountain where the where some of the monks are trained, and these monks are told, just follow the master, no matter where he leads you into the depths of the forest, and you have to do his bidding. Just as Arjun said that I will do as you karishye vachanam tava. Karishye vachanam tava is in our scriptures too. And in this Japanese practice, the master leads them and they are expected to just follow him. So sometimes he says there is a icy cold waterfall and the master says sit under it. And what are they expected to say? Uketamo. They go deep into a forest and they find a cave and there is no light. And the master says sit in that dark cave and meditate for 12 hours. Uketamo. Yes, I accept. Go without food for only one single day on your trek. Uketamo. It doesn't matter what the master is saying, but when these monks come back from this training, what bearing does it have on their life? It means that they have not only intellectualized the idea of I accept, I surrender, I accept. It is not an intellectual thing. It becomes part of their swabhava. Their natural response to everything becomes uketamo. You give me food today? Okay, uketamo. So in the sansar, they are able to function like true munihi, monks. So there's not much of a difference. I'm only saying that I found this difference striking, that what we try to transform our lives through an intellectual listening, verbalizing, and the Japanese turn it into a physical training such that the response, the spiritual response becomes internalized, integrated into our swabhava. That's the beauty of the Japanese systems. Uketamo, I accept. Karishye tava. So arigato is the other word we have to remember, because Sanjay is also not leaving the stage right now without expressing his extreme gratitude to Ved Vyasji. As he's saying, Vyasa Prasad, this is by the grace of Ved Vyasji that I have received this. Now, going on to 76 and 77 together, Sanjay says, Rajan samsmrita samsmritya संवादमिमम् अद्भुतं केशवार्जुनयो पुण्यं हृष्यामि च मुहुर्मुहुः. So, Rajasanya samsmritya means what? I remember again and again. Muhuhu. Again and again I am reminded of the highest knowledge. Who is saying this? Sanjay. By again and again, what does he mean? He means that now this is ringing in my head. This highest knowledge is ringing in my head over and over again. Think about our lives. What is it that rings in our head over and over again? Most of the time it is some petty happiness, some disgruntlement, some personal dissatisfaction, some small human interaction that we have been part of. All that is again and again going on in our minds, ringing again and again. In Sanjay's mind, this highest knowledge given by Krishna, he said samsmritya is ringing again and again. And that is the image that Sanjay is going to carry in his mind of this mystic dialogue. What is that what is that image? The image of the absolute oneness of everything. Advaita. This philosophy is called Advaita because it is consciousness that creates everything in creation, and therefore all of creation carries consciousness with it as its cause. Simple, as simple as that. If you want the Advaita philosophy in one nutshell, this is it. From consciousness, all creation comes, and in creation, everything carries consciousness as its own cause. The cause has to be carried in the product. The clay has to be part of the pot. So, this is what, but the trouble is, we will see in verse number 77, Tacha samsmritya rupamatyadbhutam hare. Rupa, your form, adbhutam, miraculous and wonderful. Hare, Krishna. Brismayo me mahan rajan, hrishyami cha punah. Remembering again and again that most wonderful form of yours, Hari. The only time he showed his form was as a Virat Roop in chapter 11. And that, in fact, was quite a scary Roop. But do we remember Krishna as a compassionate friend? Or in the 11th chapter, we saw him as this huge, all-pervading, luminescent light, all-powerful luminescence. We can't even call it light because light becomes an object with its properties of frequency and particles and waves. No. This luminescence, which is consciousness, doesn't have waves and particles and atoms like light has. So luminescence itself is the quality. And you know how many saints who have actually viewed this roop of the highest consciousness or God, how they struggle with feeble and frail language. Language becomes very feeble and frail vehicle to carry that vast message. For every saint, whether in Christianity or in Islam or in any other stream of thought, they struggle with language. So I'm going to quote one of the saints of the 10th century, that is Saint Hildegard, a German saint. She says, I have seen this presence. And I'm quoting, that presence says, I am the supreme and fiery force. I am the supreme and fiery force that sends forth all sparks of life. Death had no part in me. Death hath no part in me, and yet I allot death. I am the fiery essence, divine substance that glows in all the fields, the waters, the sun, the stars, and the wind. I am everywhere. Sarvagataha. I sustain the breath of all. All forms live and exist because I am in them and I am of their life. A Christian saint describes exactly what Krishna has said. Maya tadamidam sarvam, I am in everything. Mat sthani sarva bhutani. There is no being or place where I do not exist. So no matter to what stream of thought the saint may belong. And we're talking of saints. We are not talking of the rabble-rousers who have hardly read their own scriptures and who come onto the streets and they spout superficial things about their so-called religion. No, I'm not talking of the unlettered religious man. I'm talking about saints, and they have all come upon the exact same truth. Why? Because truth is one. It's not saying I have seen a particular form and you have seen some other form. It's not possible to say, in physics you can't say, oh, gravity functions differently for me and for you. Yes, it functions differently on different planets. But gravity, that quality of attraction, is the same. How can that truth change? So when you look at the descriptions given in any of the scriptures, they have all finally come upon the same truth. We are waiting for the day when physicists and scientists will come upon, and metaphysicists will come upon the same truth. But let me tell you, not many saints have attempted to describe it. The very brave ones have been able to describe the highest truth. Why? Because language, as I said, is a very feeble and frail vehicle, medium to carry the highest truth. And yet, we have to use it. We don't have a choice. Coming to the last and final verse of the final chapter of the great Bhagavad Gita, Sanjay says in verse number 78, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishno Yatra Patho Dhanurdharaha. Dhanurdharaha. Arjun is now finally holding his Dhanusha. So he has now come back to the sansar from that despondent state, come back equipped with the knowledge. We are also meant to come back into sansar, into all our activities and duties and the demands of sansar, carrying our dhanusya and knowledge back. Tatra shrir vijayo bhutihi bhutir dhruvani tir matir mama. Sanjay says, wherever there is Krishna and the Lord of Yoga, and wherever there is Partha, the archer, wherever there is Arjun and Krishna, there will be prosperity, victory, happiness, and people will be firm in their understanding. What does this mean? Arjun stands for dynamism. In the material world, we have dynamism. We are also Prakriti, matter, Arjun. And Krishna is the spiritual part. When these two stand together, Arjun's dynamism and Krishna's spirituality, then how can we not have prosperity and happiness and victory in this world? So the art of living in this sansar basically is to be able to distinguish our true identity as not just material identity. The art of living is that I am not just this piece of matter. I am spirit. I am Krishna. Krishna is with me. Where Arjuna and Krishna stand together, we cannot but be firm in our victory over sorrow or over anything. So the word used here, of course, is prosperity. So all the material prosperity also will automatically come our way. So it simply means the secular and the sacred, they stand together. You can't say that, oh, I'm going to be a sannyasi and escape into the world. So what does this all mean? The very first word in the Bhagavad Gita, in the first verse, the first line spoken by Dhritarashtra is Dharma Kshetre. The first word is Dharma. And in the 18th chapter, if we have a look at the last verse, 78th verse, last word is Mama. If you put them together, it comes to, what is Gita all about? Dharma, Mama. Mama Dharma. My Dharma. All that we need to understand through the Gita is what is my Dharma. The word Dharma is not easy to understand because it has been used variously and with variations. And it has three meanings. I must understand and live all three. First Dharma, easy to understand, my duty. which Arjun did not understand. And now he has picked up his Dhanush. Okay, so my duty is my dharma, whatever has been given to me. Okay, I understand that. My system of belief, what is the highest truth, is my dharma, and I must follow what God's will is. That is my dharma. Okay. What is the last meaning of dharma? The dharma is my swaroop. That means my real swaroop, my real dharma or my real swaroop is Sat Chit Anand. I have to know it. Understanding all these three, my duty and what is my belief system, how should I conduct myself in sansar, and what is my real swaroop, dharma, dharma, dharma. All this when I understand, it becomes mama dharma. Understanding mama dharma is the only message and the entire message of the Bhagavad Gita. And who will take us to it? So we need the grace of gurus, we need the grace of scriptures, we have had a lot of grace to be able to read and to have the tap to sit through months upon months, chapter after chapter. That tap is there. So that means we have been graced with a lot, and yet it is our duty to uddhare datmanatmanam, lift yourself by yourself. Chapter 6. Uddhare datmanatmanam. No matter how many scriptures surround us, how many gurus surround us, we lift ourselves by ourselves. What is that consciousness? It's that divine energy, that self-sustaining. It is not born of something. It will not be extinguished by anything. It is self-sustaining, self-luminous, self-effulgent. That consciousness is the most worthy object of our attention. We put our attention on sansar, but this is the only most worthy object of our attention, and if you wish, of our worship and adoration and study and understanding. So the one who surrenders to this concept or this divine truth becomes the vehicle of that divine energy, which means that those saints who had become the vehicles of carrying this highest truth were actually becoming divine in themselves, or not becoming divine. The divinity is always with them. They actually could express that divinity. So you could see a certain tej, a certain forbearance, a certain steadiness in them, in all the rishis and saints. You can see it even today, because they are the vehicles that carry that divinity and they express it. And thus, this is the light of the absolute truth. This is the light that can dispel all our ignorance. Ignorance of what? Of Sat and Asat, falsehood basically. Our ignorance is about what is false and what is truth. And we have our misplaced understanding of this. That is the only ignorance that has to be dispelled. And what can dispel it? The understanding of the highest truth. So that light, let all of us have that light descend upon us, to live by that truth and to hold on to it, to be able to share it. Let that grace come upon this group, to every listener and to every sadhak. And then with these words we close the chapter, which is actually the chapter of Moksha Sannyasa. Om Tat Saditi Srimad Bhagavad Gitasu Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Moksha Sannyasa Yogo Namaha Ashtadashodhyayaha. Harihi Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। हरि ओम श्री कृष्णार्पणमस्तु। 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 ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। हरि